Tonight is, we think, very much a humanist event, even though you might not expect it from who we invited, who our amazing guests are. So I just want to say a brief word about humanism by way of introducing the event and what we had in mind with it. You may not be familiar with it. So I could, if I wanted to introduce just the basic ideas of humanism, I could say stuff like no heaven and no hell. And I could say that humanists determine the nature of the universe according to evidence and critical thinking and the scientific method. So, obviously we worship the church of the flying spaghetti monster. I could say that. I could talk about our beliefs in gods and sacred texts as human literature and mythology. And I could do that, and it would be important to do that tonight because we as humanists believe that things like gods and sacred texts are human literature and mythology, and they are sometimes, those things, sometimes sublime, and other times deeply, deeply problematic, and other times simply perhaps outshone by human creations of other kinds, like what you just heard tonight, or what you're about to hear discussed. So, Jodi Picoult won't be able to perform as John did for us her entire, or a significant portion of her entire work, because you've written 18 novels that collectively have made you among the very most popular and most beloved novelists in the entire United States. Your novels have dealt with almost all, it seems at this point, of the key issues of our time. You've grappled with the most important moral debates, philosophical debates of our time, and you put them into these amazing characters that people have so loved. And I can't say anywhere near what I could say about them. You're going to have a great conversation. I'm going to read you just one quote about your work. It was from the LA Times, and I love this. Jodi Picoult's novels do not gather dust on the bedside table. They are gobbled up quickly, and the readers want more. You have to admire her grace under pressure. By throwing us into these debates, she gives her readers the gift of faith in a higher justice, not the law, God, or modern medicine, but the human spirit and human goodness. That's what your work is about. And that's why we wanted to bring you here. We felt, when we knew we had the opportunity to bring you, and then it turned out that we had the opportunity to bring you on World AIDS Day. And then when we realized that your latest novel was about these incredibly important topics like gay rights, love, justice, and music, then we realized we had the opportunity to pair you with John Grant on that subject, even though it could have been equally powerful to pair you with Ellen Wilber, who has created a whole album with you based on this most recent novel, and we can't recommend highly enough that people listen to that album. But when all those things came together, we realized that what humanism is about is taking a world that is so often less beautiful, more lonely, darker than we would like it to be, and through the power of human creativity, making it lighter, making it more beautiful, making it more inspiring. That's what you've done in your career. And we are so grateful you joined us tonight. So one round of applause for Jodi Picoult, please. You almost never consent to do conversations about your work, and we've almost never had the opportunity for our wonderful, dedicated campus outreach and development manager, I was quoting her former title, Sarah Chandonnet, who's been working for us since 2009, and was our student at Harvard Divinity School before that. You guys are going to have a rare conversation about Jodi's work and Take it away.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg said, my name is Sarah Chandonnet. I'm the Outreach and Development Manager here at the Humanist Chaplaincy at Harvard. That's a brand new title, as Greg kind of showed you. Tonight, obviously, we're so lucky to be here with Jodi Picoult, who is quite possibly the busiest writer and mother on the planet. I'm going to explain a little bit what we're going to do tonight. First, we're going to have a fairly brief, maybe not brief, facilitated Q&A, and then we're going to open the floor to the audience. So if you have a burning question for Jodi, you might want to write it down now. Now, the theme of the evening, of course, has really been around Sing You Home, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But first, let's talk a little bit about you. As Greg said, as we all know, you've written 18 novels. I think I've only read 10, I'm sorry. You span themes like law, prison, medicine, genetics, ghosts, religion, ethics. What inspires you to take a big idea like that, or any of these, and turn it into a novel?
The things I write about come from questions that I can't answer. And there's no shortage of those in the world. So I'm glad that Greg thinks I've written about everything, because I guess I can retire now. I'm very excited. But it really is, for me, a way to explore something that I don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. I think that the act of writing a book for me is very similar to the act of reading it for a reader. I force myself to look at all different sides of an equation. I may not change my opinion, but I have a much better sense of why my opinion is what it is by the time that I'm finished.
So you're a researcher as well.
I think I'm just a student. I'm really just a frustrated academic. Because I mean, that's really what I do. I'm constantly researching and digging a little deeper and poking things with a stick to see what happens.
And now you're no stranger to Cambridge either. You got your master's at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. And so, I'm curious, do you consider your role as a writer to also be one of an educator? And if that's the case, I mean, what are you hoping that your audience learns from you and from everything you write?
I actually say very often that I am still a teacher. I just have a much bigger classroom. And, I didn't teach for very long. I did go to Harvard's Ed School. I graduated in, I think it was 90, yeah, because we got married in 89. So in 90, I graduated. And the reason I went to Harvard was because I think there were 2 teaching jobs in Massachusetts that year. And I figured with that degree, I would definitely get one. And I did. And, I taught for a year in the public schools in Concord, Mass. And then they pink slipped the 6 new teachers the first day of school because they had no money in the budget for the following year. So we all knew we were going to be canned at the end of the year, and I wound up getting pregnant and having a baby, and that was also the year after that was the year that I got published, and I kept writing because it's a lot easier than teaching 8th grade English. And basically, I think that when you write, when anyone who writes and is lucky enough to be published is so thrilled that anyone wants to read what they write. Mm-hmm. Most of us would be delighted to see a book in print even if no one picked it up. But if someone does pick it up, that's a great thing. Right. And if you have that fortune, you have a little bit of responsibility. It's like that Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Because if you have people reading your books, you do have a bit of a pulpit. And so you should think about what you can say. That's also a double-edged sword, because I've sort of made a career out of not telling people what to think. I don't want to be the kind of writer who says, you should believe this. Mm-hmm. I want to be the kind of writer who says, how come you believe that? And have you thought about what the other side has to say? You may never agree, but I think that's the beginning of a conversation, and that's a very healthy place to start with a particularly divided country.
Yes, well, I mean, it's nice to have you back at Harvard with a pulpit here, no less, if you choose to use it. Of course, I mean, you'll notice that we're hosting tonight's humanism event in Harvard's official church. Yeah. But, you do touch on a lot of religious themes in your books. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's breaking with Amish tradition. There's alternative spirituality and ghosts. There's Gnosticism. There's somebody expected to be Jesus who isn't. Sorry to ruin the end of that book. Do you see any sort of evolution in your writing about religion just over your career?
I think it's one of the topics that I continue to come back to because, like I said, it's something I don't have an answer to. Mm-hmm. And when I don't have an answer, I keep going back at it. I'm like a dog with a bone. And I wouldn't say that I've really evolved in the way I've thought about religion. What I have noticed is the way that the world has changed in their thinking about religion. And that, if anything, is what drives me to keep coming back to the topic. Again, my modus operandi has always been to say to people, why? Why do you think you're right? And how can you reevaluate those beliefs that you mostly were probably given as a kid, particularly when it comes to religion. So what I like to say actually is when I write a book that involves religion, that at least I'm going to try to offend all religions equally. And usually I think I succeed at that.
Well, I guess in doing so, my question is, do you have a character that you feel best represents your own way of thinking about religion or your own beliefs?
I'm not really any of my characters. That always comes as a tremendous shock to people, but I think I'd like to believe at least I'm a better mother than most of them. And, I think that when I think about the trajectory of religious belief, if I were going to be like anyone, I would probably say I'm like Father Michael in the second half of Change of Heart, because he starts off very much as a believer. He's a Catholic priest and winds up with a guy on death row that he's counseling, Shea Bourne, who is claiming, other people in the prison are claiming that he is a Messiah and he's performing miracles. And Father Michael could think of one other guy who had a death sentence over his head who was performing miracles, and things didn't work out well for Jesus either. So he listens very carefully. And what he hears from Shea, this condemned man, is basically nothing he's been taught, but words that that come verbatim from a gospel that was thrown out of the Bible historically, called the Gospel of Thomas. And what I love about Father Michael's character is that he really has to break down the walls of what he's been told to discover his own truth, which of course is the basic tenet of Gnosticism. I did a lot of research with Elaine Pagels for that book, which was so cool. It was like having a private tutorial. And I chased the poor woman down on a ski vacation in Colorado, actually, so that she would talk to me. And it was really interesting to be able to think historically about a group of people who called themselves Christians, but who felt that religion was different for everyone, and that you could have a priest, but he couldn't tell you what to believe, and Jesus wasn't your savior, he was just a guide if you needed him, but that because religion was different, and because it was about finding something divine in each of us, it had to necessarily be a different experience for people. And what's fascinating historically about that, I can see my academic is showing now, but what was fascinating about that is that the codification of the Christian church by the bishop of Lyon, Irenaeus, was really important, because without it, there probably wouldn't have been Christianity in the world, historically. But in a little bit of a way, by saying, here's what you believe, and if you don't believe this, you're not a true Christian, he kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, because you also throw out that sense that maybe the journey to spirituality and spiritual enlightenment might be different for different people. In my personal opinion, we are in a place in this country where that is very hard for almost half the country to believe. And religion isn't about being holy anymore, it's about being holier than thou. And that really upsets me.